The Dragonback series by Timothy Zahn. Book 4, Dragon and Herdsman. Chapter 13. By now, it was completely dark. Briefly, Jack wondered how Allison was doing with the rest of the herd, then put her from his mind. She could take care of herself, and he was likely to have enough troubles of his own without borrowing any of hers. In the dusk, from 30 feet up, the footing along the cut had looked pretty tricky. And full dark and up close and personal, it was even worse. Everything around him seemed to be twisted vines, stiff reeds, and thorny plants that grabbed at his clothing and shoes. Even with Dracos moving ahead and cutting the worst of it from his path, it was pretty slow going. The limp puka balanced across his shoulders didn't make it any easier. At least we don't have anyone sniping at us, Jack puffed after fighting his way through a particularly unsociable row of reeds. That's something, anyway.
True,
Draco said.
And I find that fact ominous. The calm clip trick should not have fooled them nearly this long.
Not unless they're really stupid, Jack admitted. Maybe they decided to call it quits for the night.
I don't know why they would,
Draco said.
They must certainly have equipment for seeing in the darkness. The disadvantage would be ours.
Mine and Allison's, maybe, but not yours, Jack pointed out. You do a lot better in the dark than we do. And personally, if I were them, I'd be a little leery about going up against a Kadapoat warrior at night.
Perhaps,
Draco said, slashing through yet another stand of reeds.
We shall see when we rejoin the...
He trailed off. The herd? Jack suggested quietly. There was a sharp swishing noise through the reeds as Dracos twitched his tail.
I thought I could become used to the idea,
the dragon said, a deep sadness in his voice.
But I cannot. I'm sorry.
Nothing to be sorry for, Jack assured him. I've never run into any primitive humans myself, but there's supposed to be a few tribes of them still scattered through Earth's denser jungles. I'd probably be just as weirded out if I ran into one of them. There was a moment of silence, and Jack winced to himself. The situations weren't really the same, and they both knew it.
At any rate, I appreciate all you are doing for them,
Draco said.
Taking their burden upon yourself, quite literally in this case.
No problem, Jack said. Besides, I was herded around pretty much the same way back in the Wynyard's Edge. About time I got to see how the other side lives.
I trust it is to your liking.
Jack hunched forward and got a fresh grip on his passenger. Just great, he said, straightening up and flinching as the leaves of a low-hanging branch brushed against his forehead. I could do this all night.
Let us hope you won't have to.
They continued on in the silence. The ground didn't get any easier to navigate, but as his night vision slowly improved, Jack began to get the knack of seeing and deciphering the various shades of gray around him. Dracos's gold scales appeared almost luminous in the faint starlight, providing him with a fairly clear view of the path the dragon was carving out. Jack's improved vision undoubtedly saved him from a few stumbles over the next hour of travel. Unfortunately, it didn't do anything to help with the weight slowly crushing his shoulders. But there was something else about his passenger, a growing feeling that Jack couldn't quite put his finger on, a kind of restlessness, along with an almost twitching that he couldn't exactly feel, but somehow knew was there. And at first he assumed it had to do with the puka's double leg sprain, but adjusting his grip and trying to walk more smoothly didn't seem to affect the restlessness. The more he tried to ease the puka's ride, in fact, the more twitchy he became. Jack had just decided it was time to ask Dracos about it when the puka's weight suddenly vanished.
Yo!
Jack gasped.
What?
Dracos demanded, twisting around. Sorry. I was just startled. Jack hastened to assure him, squirming a little as his former passenger twisted himself into place around Jack's chest, back, and legs. I guess he decided he could use me as a host after all.
He is on you!
With a noisy bound, Dracos landed at Jack's side, his forepaws slipping into the gap in Jack's shirt.
Are you all right?
I'm fine, Jack said, pushing the probing forepaws away. Cut it out, will you? That tickles.
I was merely concerned,
Dracos said, reluctantly pulling back. I'm fine, Jack repeated, straightening his shirt collar. And this is our chance to make some decent time. Let's get moving. With the injured animal now riding Jack's skin like a good Kada should, the trip did indeed become easier. There were still a few patches of dense vegetation that Dracos had to cut through, but everything else Jack was able to plow his way through on his own. It took them about another half hour to get around the hill Jack had pointed out to Allison. On the far side was a much gentler slope, and 20 minutes later they were back to the level they'd been on when the puka had fallen off the ridge. There we go, Jack murmured, breathing hard. Piece of cake.
You will someday have to cook for me this cake you so often speak of,
Draco said dryly.
Come, we must find Allison and the others.
Go ahead, Jack said, pushing aside the reeds at the base of the thick tree and sitting down against the trunk. I'll wait here.
That may be dangerous,
Dracos warned.
There are many night creatures around. Some are undoubtedly predators.
I've got my tangler, Jack reminded him, pulling out the weapon and setting it on his lap. I just need to rest for a few minutes.
Then I will wait with you,
Dracos said.
When you're ready, we'll go together.
Look, just go on, all right? Jack said, starting to feel annoyed. If you want to know the truth, I'm more worried about Allison than I am about me. Anyway, they can't be that far ahead of us. Just find them, then come back and get me.
But...
Abruptly, Dracos broke off, and in the darkness, Jack saw his tongue flicking rapidly in and out of his mouth. What is it? He whispered.
Movement!
Dracos murmured back, putting his snout right up against Jack's ear.
The Malison Ring soldiers have arrived!
Jack's heart seemed to freeze in his chest. Where? He breathed.
To the south,
Dracos said, his tongue flicking out twice more.
20 of them at least, including non-humans. They are traveling north in a sweep line, 50 to 100 yards back from our position.
Reflexively, Jack pressed his back harder against the tree. By pure luck, he'd sat himself down on the north side of a tree that was wide enough to shield him from the view of the approaching soldiers. But that would only protect him until they passed and someone decided to take a look to the side.
And,
Dracos added,
there are 3 to 5 more already past us to the south. Or to the north, I mean.
Jack frowned. 2 separate waves? Could Colonel Frost have figured out that he and Allison had split up?
The lead group will be scouts,
Dracos said, answering his unspoken question.
The larger group is the main fighting force.
So Frost didn't know he and Allison had been separated. Jack started breathing a little easier again. Can you tell where Allison and the others are? He asked Dracos. Again, the tongue flicked out.
No, but the lack of accuracy implies they have not yet been attacked. Possibly not even spotted.
And in the meantime, Jack and Dracos were sitting between 2 enemy waves, both of which were completely unaware of their presence. There ought to be some seriously interesting ways to take advantage of that. Any idea how the bad guys are traveling?
Most likely in a similar formation to what they used earlier,
Dracos said.
They will be in small groups of 2 to 5 soldiers. All the members of a group will be in sight of each other, but they will be spaced far enough apart to keep me from stopping all of them before they can sound an alarm.
Jack grimaced. Any ideas?
They will be expecting a Kadar warrior,
Dracos said, lowering his voice even further.
But they will not be expecting a Kadar warrior with a tangler.
Okay, Jack said slowly, frowning as he handed over the weapon. And this is going to help us how?
You will see,
Draco said, taking the tangler and tucking it under his left foreleg.
How many shots are left?
11.
Good,
Draco said.
Stay here and remain still. The tree and its surrounding reeds should protect you from.
And then, without even a whisper of warning, Jack's head and shoulders were shoved hard into the tree trunk behind him as the red puka riding his skin suddenly leaped from the front of his shirt. Reflexively, Jack opened his mouth to shout a warning, strangled it down just in time. Move, he thought urgently toward the puka, wiggling his fingers toward the creature as violently as he dared. The soldiers could arrive at any second. Get out of here! But the red dragon ignored him. He shook himself once, like a dog just in out of the rain, and twisted his long neck around once to look at Jack. Then, turning around again, he jabbed his tongue out a few times and started casually loping northward. He'd gotten perhaps 10 paces when the forest exploded with the brilliant light and the shattering noise of gunfire from behind him. No! Jack howled, the sound of his voice swallowed up by the stuttering thunderclaps. But it was too late. Before the red puka could even react, his scales were already bursting apart from multiple hits. He writhed once in surprise and agony, collapsing to the ground. An instant later, he was gone. Jack stared at the spot where the puka had been, his stomach wanting to be sick. Dracos had told him how Kadar simply vanished when they died, going two-dimensional and fading away. But to watch it happen right before his eyes was as eerie as it was horrifying. And still the gunfire continued to rake the area. Jack pressed his hands tightly to his ears, trying to block out the noise hammering his skull, and wondering what in blazes the soldiers were doing. Did they really think that poor, stupid animal could have escaped their attack? And then suddenly he understood. Of course, no mere animal could have lived through that. But they weren't hunting animals. In fact, odds were they didn't even know the puka herd existed. They were hunting Dracos, poet warrior of the Kadar, and they probably thought they had just killed him. Jack looked around, squinting in the flickering light as he searched for his partner. He finally spotted him, clinging upside down to the tree trunk among the branches 5 feet above Jack's head. The dragon's scales had gone black in Kadar combat mode, and there was a glint in his glowing green eyes that sent a fresh shiver down Jack's spine. With a final lingering burst, the gunfire ceased. Cautiously, Jack eased his hands away from his throbbing ears, only to find that there was an echo of the same sound coming from somewhere in the distance in front of him. Allison and the others were under attack.
Dracos,
he whispered urgently.
I know,
the dragon whispered back, his voice deathly calm.
Stay here. I will return for you.